Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world. This is a compressed structural companion to the deep dive. This is not a summary, this is not advice.
So today, we're going to dig into Jon Ronson's book, The Psychopath Test. We're using it to see how our institutions take something as fuzzy and uncertain as human psychology and just slap a simple administratable label on it. And of course, how they then use that label to decide who gets power, who gets punished, and who gets seen as legitimate. So where does this whole labeling thing even begin? Well, it usually kicks off with a single, incredibly influential tool, a tool that promises a clear, black and white, definitive answer. And here it is. It's basically a 20-point checklist created by a psychologist named Robert Hare. It scores you on traits like having a grandiose sense of self-worth or a lack of empathy. And here's the kicker. If you score 30 or above, boom, you're officially a psychopath. It sounds so simple, right? But the consequences of that label, they're absolutely massive. But listen, this checklist, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. It's the front door. To get what's really going on, we have to zoom out and look at the huge machine this little tool is feeding. That system, well, the technical term is diagnostic and forensic classification, but let's just think of it like this. It's an institutional machine, and it's got one core function: to take all the messy, complicated, gray areas of being human and just crush them down into these neat, tidy little boxes, categories, scores, and, risk identities. Now, you have to understand, this machine was never built to actually understand people better. No way. It was built for one thing: administration, for managing people. And the fuel that keeps this thing running? It's a nonstop, relentless demand for certainty. So why this obsession with certainty? I mean, what's the big deal? Well, for these big, powerful institutions, simple labels are like gold. Suddenly, courts have a clear-cut risk assessment for sentencing. Prisons have an easy tool for managing their population. The media gets a perfect, simple, good guy versus bad guy story. For them, certainty isn't just nice to have, it's efficient. And this quote from the guy who made the checklist, wow, it just lays the whole game bare. He basically says the word psychopath is just a convenience. It's not about some profound psychological truth. It's shorthand. It's an administrative shortcut that keeps the big institutional gears grinding away smoothly. Okay, so what happens then? What happens when a system built purely for institutional convenience starts processing actual, living, breathing human beings? What does that look like on the ground? All right, here's a good way to think about it. Our structural metaphor for today is that this system acts just like a barcode scanner at the grocery store, right? It doesn't care about the story of the thing it's scanning. It's just designed to read a simple code, assign a category, and keep the line moving. That's it. People get scanned, and then they're routed into different institutional lanes. And once you're inside, this logic creates a perfect trap, a total catch-22. I mean, look at this. If you're polite and cooperate, they say, see, proof he can only function in our structured environment. But if you resist, see, his behavior's worsening. You literally cannot win. There is no escape from the label. And as one patient, a guy named Tony, who was detained for years because of his score, as he put it, it's like witchcraft. Every single thing he did, even trying to show remorse, was just twisted and interpreted through the lens of that label, confirming the diagnosis all over again. Okay, so if the system can create these totally absurd, illogical outcomes, why on earth does it persist? Why do we keep on scanning? Well, it sticks around because it creates what you might call a useful fiction. And right here, this is the crisis in perception we're talking about. We start to actually believe the convenient label is the person. We mistake the simplified administrative map for the actual complex human territory. And hey, this is nothing new. The famous Rosenhan experiment back in 1973 showed exactly how powerful a label can be. 8 perfectly healthy volunteers went into psychiatric hospitals. They faked hearing one single word, thud. Every single one was diagnosed as insane. And from that point on, all their completely normal behavior was seen as more proof of their illness. The label just overruled reality. So the takeaway here is pretty clear. This system survives because it's useful for institutions, even if it's kind of terrible at getting at the truth. But this logic of convenient labeling, it doesn't just stay inside the walls of prisons and hospitals. Oh no. This diagnostic culture, it leaks out. It migrates into other powerful systems, like the corporate world. In fact, one study using Hare's checklist found something pretty wild. In the general population, about 1% of people score high for psychopathy. But among corporate professionals, it was almost 4%.
And what you end up with is this big, interconnected network. In prisons, the checklists are used to justify locking people away indefinitely. But in boardrooms, some of those same traits, like a lack of empathy, get a makeover. Suddenly, they're strong leadership qualities. And then in the media, these labels create the simple, dramatic villains that are so great at grabbing our attention.
Which brings us to the big final question, right? A structural one. If the very tools we use to perceive madness are themselves shaped by what an institutional machine needs them to be, then what are we actually seeing? Are we seeing the person, or are we just seeing the system's reflection staring back at us? Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer, audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.